Lawrence Sloan, ingeniero químico y máster en administración de empresas.
And today I'm going to talk to you about the association's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. First, let me give you an overview of the organization. As you can see, AIHA is a rather complex organization, and it has various elements. On the far left-hand side, we are in the United States a 501c6, and that includes the membership of the organization, about 8,500 members. And below that, you will see the Journal of Occupational and Environmental Health, which is a peer-reviewed journal. It is a technical journal that is managed by the AIHA, as well as something called the Product Stewardship Society, which is a subgroup within the AIHA for professionals that are called product stewards. On the far right-hand side of this slide, you will see two foundations. They are 501c3s. One is an education foundation that provides scholarships to students that are studying occupational hygiene in school. And the other is the Guideline Foundation, which develops community-based exposure limits for chemicals. In the middle of the slide, we have three limited liability corporations. We have an accreditation program, which is a lab accreditation practice. We have a registry program, which provides certification in different technical areas. And we have a proficiency testing program, which is basically a system that provides tests to laboratories to prove that they are competent. The AIHA has a strategic plan. The current plan has a mission and vision statement. The mission of the association is to empower those who apply scientific knowledge to protect all workers from occupational hazards. The mission is basically the purpose of the organization. The vision is a world where all workers are healthy and safe. The AIHA strategic plan has 5 areas of interest, and these are called domains. And as you can see on this slide, we have community, awareness, advancement and dissemination of knowledge, integrity of practice, and advocacy. For each one of these domains, we have what's called a success statement. How do we know that we are achieving success in each of these areas? And then, of course, there are strategy statements that support each of these domains. So this slide shows the fundamental knowledge that is required to become an occupational hygienist in the United States. And you can see at the bottom the basic science and math that every student must comply and complete as he or she studies in school. The next level up are the fundamentals of occupational hygiene. And then from there, the application of industrial hygiene or occupational hygiene to the real world. And that includes the hierarchy of controls, which is the part that is listed in blue. Now, to the right, you will see an arrow that says emerging issues and something that looks like a little flashlight. You can see to the far right of this slide something that's labeled content priorities. These are the areas of knowledge that the association is focusing its attention on developing new resources, new education, new publications. The bottom content priority is called Communicating IH Industrial Hygiene Concepts. And I would say that everything that we have been doing in response to the COVID-19 pandemic focuses on how do we better communicate occupational hygiene to people that don't know a lot about it. So what are we doing to communicate resources, important information to those in the community that need to understand the fundamentals? When the pandemic occurred and was declared by the WHO at the end of February, the AIHA's first response was to create a coronavirus outbreak resource center. On this slide, you will see a link, and you can click on that link to the resource center. It contains a variety of materials that are published by allied organizations and federal US agencies, as well as links to information that has been created by the AIHA. This is a list of some guidance documents that has been created by the AIHA volunteer membership. So you can see each of these links is actually linked to a document that is housed on the website. The first one is the respiratory fit testing consultants listing. So we maintain a listing of consultants here in the United States that provide fit testing for companies all around the world. The next one is a document that provides some basic instruction on how do you use respirators. How do you put them on? How do you take them off? How do you maintain them? The next one is the Occupational Safety and Health Guide for surface disinfection practices using ultraviolet radiation. This is a very basic document that helps provide information on the proper use of UV radiation in cleaning the air in buildings. The next one is a document on personal protective equipment to help protect folks from the virus. The next one is the use of what are called real-time detection systems that help to protect the public during the pandemic. The next is a document that helps to provide practical instruction on workplace cleaning in both commercial, institutional, and industrial settings. The next one is a guide to ergonomic best practices when you are working from home, like I am right now. The next one is designed to help building owners understand how to open their facilities after having been closed for a long amount of time. So this document talks about things like the Legionella and other microorganisms that might have grown in your water systems. If buildings are closed, you need to protect and treat your water systems from bacteria that might have grown during the time that the buildings have been closed down. The next one is in Spanish, and I want to thank the Peruvian Association for their efforts to translate this document, The Role of the Industrial Hygienist in a Pandemic. And then the last three documents are in development: Reducing the Risk of COVID-19 Using Engineering Controls. This one's going to talk about different types of filtration as well as air exchange rates within the closed building space. An Employer's Guide to COVID Cleaning and Disinfection in a non-healthcare environment. And finally, Effective and Safe Practices Guidance for basically maintenance personnel in a building. So these last three documents are undergoing development, and they will be released in the next several weeks. Specifically, this slide shows the recovering from COVID-19 building closures. So you will see that specifically this document focuses on building owners and operators. How do you maintain proper indoor environment conditions? How do you manage your heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems? What modifications need to be made to ensure that the quality of the air in the building is the best possible state? Over the last several months, we have done quite a bit of collaboration with other organizations here in the United States. There is an organization called ACOM, ACOEM, and that is an association for occupational physicians. Back in March, AIHA and ACOM put out a communication that called for donations of personal protective equipment. AIHA, ACOM, and the American Hospital Association joined efforts that urged our members to make donations of any surplus personal protective equipment to help healthcare workers during the crisis. And this includes N95s, N99s, and others. AIHA also partnered with APSA, which is the International Biosafety Association, and we issued a joint statement on the coronavirus. We indicated how much we were appreciative of members during these difficult times and the work that they do in the global community. APSA has resources in the areas of both biosafety and biosecurity, and AIHA has resources in the area of industrial or occupational hygiene. So together we are critical partners in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. And finally, we were very successful in working with the US federal government to recognize occupational safety and health professionals as what are called essential workers. And this is actually done under the US Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which is part of the Department of Homeland Security. So we are very pleased that occupational safety and health workers are deemed essential workers in the U.S. economy. In late April, we decided that the U.S. federal government was not providing enough practical information, particularly to help small businesses open up their operations. And so we created what's called the Back to Work Safely Initiative. And you can see here, this is the website. It is www.backtoworksafely.org. The point of this initiative was to provide practical guidance for small businesses across different industry sectors. The guidelines were developed to help small businesses that don't have occupational safety and health expertise available easily. All of these documents were provided from the perspective of what do you need to do as an employer, what do you need to do as an employee, and what do you need to do as a general member of the public who would visit these establishments. And we are currently in the process of working with the folks at AMIHI, which is the Mexican Association, and we've already translated several of these documents into Spanish. So let's go through the different documents that have been created. Since the end of April, we have created some 24 different documents, and I'm going to walk you through each of these documents. And you can see on these slides which ones currently are available in Spanish. All of these documents are available free of charge. You simply go to the website and you click on the link and you can download the documents. These documents are living documents. In other words, they are constantly being edited. So as our members are receiving updated information, we will update these documents and then post the updated document on the website. So it is best for you to access the website and then come back in the future to see if there are any changes to the documents. So from left to right, the first document on this slide is amateur sports guidelines. So if you are volunteering as a coach or an umpire for, say, Little League Baseball here in the United States, this is a document to help you understand your role as a volunteer with amateur sports. The next one is for at-home service providers. So this would be for those that are providing services to the home, whether you are a plumber, an electrician, you are providing handyman services, or perhaps you're a cleaning service in the home. The next one is for bars. The next one is for business services. So let's say you're operating a bank, a notary, or a title company. The next one is for childcare centers or daycare centers. The next one is for dental offices and clinics. The next one is for street vendors and farmers markets. So these are outdoor establishments for the most part. The next one is for construction job sites. The next one is for general building office settings. The next is for gyms and workout facilities. Then we move on to hair and nail salons or beauty salons, institutions of higher education, which are colleges and universities, museums and other collecting institutions, libraries, physical and occupational therapy, massage therapy, and chiropractic offices, retail establishments, so shops and stores, shopping malls, restaurants, ride share such as Uber or Lyft, schools, kindergarten through 12th grade, and small lodging establishments, including small motels, hotels, bed and breakfasts, small manufacturing companies, small sports and entertainment venues. So this would be things like theaters, bowling alleys, areas. In the United States, we have a chain called Chuck E. Cheese, which is designed for kids. Anywhere where you're bringing people into an environment for purely entertainment purposes. The next one is worship services. So this would be in churches and mosques, synagogues, and then warehouse and logistics. So this would be where you are storing inventory, for example, in a large warehouse. So as a result of all of this effort to create these documents, we have received quite a bit of publicity in the mass media here in the United States. We have been quoted and we have been interviewed by Bloomberg Law. We have been quoted and interviewed by the Washington Examiner, which is a local newspaper here in the DC area, the Business Insider newspaper, USA Today newspaper, the Wall Street Journal, business.com, And one of our favorites was in working with Mark Cuban, who is well known on his appearances on a US television show called Shark Tank. You might receive that show down in Colombia. Mark was instrumental in helping us get this project up to launch this project for us. And so he ended up tweeting about the Back to Work Safely initiative a couple times on Twitter. So we're very appreciative of the support from Mr. Cuban. So finally, these resources are free and they are available to everyone. So please take some time to access these documents, share them with your colleagues. Again, we are going to continue to translate all of these documents into Spanish, and together we can go back to work safely. So in general, if you have any questions about AIHA, obviously you can follow us on LinkedIn. You can go to our Facebook page. You can go to Twitter and you can join in the discussion there. We have something called AIHA Network TV, which is on YouTube. And of course, you can go to our website, which is aiha.org, as well as the backtoworksafely.org website. So what I'd like to do now is talk about the AIHA's content priorities. I touched upon this earlier during my presentation, and I want to give the audience a little more of an understanding as to what are content priorities and what is the AIHA doing to advance our level of understanding about these priorities. So several years ago, the AIHA Board of Directors felt that we needed to focus our attention on areas of learning that would be most impactful for the industrial hygiene or occupational hygiene profession. And so we conducted what is called an environmental scan, where we went out to the industry and other stakeholders to better understand what are the drivers, what are the trends in the industry that we should be focusing our attention? What types of information should we be developing that's really going to advance the level of understanding about the topics that are most important to the occupational hygiene profession? So there are 5 content priorities, and what I'd like to do over the next 10 minutes or so is talk through each of the content priorities and what AIHA is trying to do to advance that level of understanding. So the first one is called exposure banding. Hopefully some folks in the audience understand what exposure banding is. Why are we concerned about exposure banding? The reason is there's this continued addition of chemicals and other exposure hazards that are affecting the communities and the workplaces. And these chemicals far exceed the capacity for the environmental health community to develop specific exposure limits for these chemicals. So exposure banding is a way basically to categorize families of chemicals in different levels of hazardous characteristics. How does exposure banding affect the occupational health profession? Well, occupational hygienists are often left with very few resources to help evaluate exposures and make the appropriate risk management decisions using current or traditional methods. And so this priority is going to focus on educating the profession on how to apply exposure banding concepts to help evaluate exposures and controls across different environments. And we're also going to help the profession explore how exposure banding relates to technological advancements that involve integrated decision making. The next content priority is something called big data and sensor technology. So why is this important? Well, there are new applications involving sensors that are allowing for faster collection and the communication of data across a broader set of agents. Advancements in data analysis and artificial intelligence are combining formerly separate data sets into one, and they're automating the decision-making process. These technological advancements are going to fundamentally change the role of the occupational hygiene professional. So this priority is going to help focus our attention on these cutting-edge technologies that collect and integrate this data. And this is then going to help us with risk assessment and management decisions. Occupational hygienists must stay relevant in the face of big data. and what does it mean for the profession? The next content priority is called total exposure health. Why is this important? So, human health outcomes are being recognized as a result of complex interaction of factors that include exposure to things like environmental agents, socioeconomic stressors, personal behaviors, and individual genomics. So think of it this way. When you are an employee somewhere, what you are exposed to in your home life, in your personal life, as you travel between your home and the workplace and back home again, it all affects your health. And so we feel that advancements in science and technology are allowing for a more powerful collection and integration of exposure to these different environmental agents and socioeconomic stressors. So how does the combination of all of these factors figure into one's well-being and general health? So the focus of this priority is to ensure that occupational hygienists are better positioned as valued participants in the discussion of total exposure health. We must be recognized as the experts in the anticipation, recognition, evaluation, and control of all these different exposures that occur in the workplace, in the home, and the community in which we live. The next content priority is something called serving the changing workforce. This is happening all over the world, and I'm sure it's happening more and more in Colombia. People are increasingly working in what are called non-traditional environments. So you might be what's called a gig worker. You might be working for Uber or Lyft. You might be a freelancer. You might be a contractor. You may not have those traditional employee worker health and safety guidelines, if you will, and protections that other people might have. So how do we protect the gig economy? How do we protect those that do not have the traditional workplace protections? In addition, the workforce is aging. There are issues with chronic disease. There are issues with folks that are migratory workers. They might come from one region to another. And there are issues with the genetics of disadvantaged communities. So the pandemic has only exacerbated or worsened the fact that a lot of these workers that are in the changing workforce, that are working in these non-traditional environments, might be more susceptible to the COVID-19 disease. So this priority is going to focus on educating occupational hygienists on the circumstances that are driving these changes and what are the implications for these changes. How can we as professionals respond to these changes and better protect human health in the workplace as well as in the communities? This is a very, very complicated but very important content priority. And then finally, communicating IH concepts. So I talked about this earlier from the perspective of COVID-19. All of the guidance documents that I mentioned earlier that are being developed, the back to work safely information, all of that could be categorized in terms of how do we as occupational hygienists better communicate with society? How do we better explain what is our value to society and what is our role? So here it's all about the fact that we need to do a better job of communicating to people that are not like ourselves, business owners, C-suite professionals, CEOs, chief executive officers, chief operating officers, environmental health safety management, human resource directors, recruiters, students that are studying industrial hygiene, occupational hygiene, all these different populations that we need to educate. And we need to do a better job of explaining what is the role of occupational hygiene in society today. And we feel that, quite frankly, the COVID-19 pandemic has given us a rare opportunity to better explain how important our jobs are to society. A lot of the work that we have done in the COVID-19 response is making the occupational hygiene profession more visible. Think about the words like personal protective equipment, PPE, and N95 respirators. Here in the United States, these terminologies are becoming very, very popular and very well known. That's a pretty amazing step for the profession to better insert itself into the public dialogue. So how does the communicating IH concept basically affect the IH profession, all of these trends, including COVID-19, are going to affect how it is that we communicate. And how do we counter the trends that people are not believing science as much anymore as they used to? We need to do a better job of explaining the role of the occupational hygienist in society and how do we apply science to make a difference. So in general, each of these content priorities is really designed to advance the level of understanding of the occupational hygiene profession. And furthermore, how we drive the narrative and make it much easier for occupational hygienists to communicate with people that are not like themselves. It's very easy to communicate with other occupational hygienists, but if you're able to communicate the business reason for suggesting a particular technical solution in the workplace, that is going to be very, very critical. So associated with communicating IH concepts are what are called soft skills. How do you communicate with others that are not scientists? How do you negotiate with people? How do you apply what's called emotional intelligence? How do you get yourself to understand the position that somebody else is in so that you can make your argument in an intelligent fashion? And how do you make sure that you don't have an unprofessional reaction, if you will, in the workplace? When you're trying to educate somebody, how do you do that in a non-threatening manner? And how do you get your point across? So all of this is baked into this concept of communicating IH concepts. And so as I wrap up here, I want you to take away the message that these content priorities are driving the creation of new education across all of the technical committees that make up the AIHA. And so as we look ahead in the coming months and years, we look to our volunteer groups, our technical committees, our business committees to develop new information that's going to help advance the level of understanding across these 5 content priorities. I would like to thank you for inviting me to this conference, and I look forward to any questions that may arise. Thank you very much.